Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books number 80. The first book today is The 12 Caesars by Michael Grant, 1975. We stopped last time talking about this book, and for some reason these 12 Caesars, or basically kings of the Roman Empire, these 12 specific men have been picked for study, and in this book, and there's actually a previous book or another book by a different author about the same men, and they were picked for their significance, and I guess because they're interesting and so forth. Now the different fellows mentioned include Julius Caesar, who was the most famous, who established autocratic rule. In other words, I believe the end of Roman democracy when the Roman Republic became a Roman Empire. And that's why you could say he's been sort of blamed for the end of democracy in ancient Rome. Although I actually I kind of like the guy, but anyway, he's the most famous. Augustus Caesar, who was his successor, I believe, who hid his autocracy, who was a dictator, but tried to act like he was democratic, and that can happen. You know, one of the things in politics is you want to fool people, especially when you're up to no good. Tiberius was a guy, a Caesar who struggled. Caligula, who did not hide his autocracy and was really terrible. Of course, Caligula is famous for really being very, very immoral. Some of the funny things, he actually had his horse elected to the Senate. I used to wonder about that, whether he actually came and stood there if they asked for his opinion, his horse. And this was actually, I think, Caligula's way of mocking the Senate, by having his horse come in there. Of course, the horse probably didn't know what was going on. Now, how can a horse really participate in democratic debate? Nero, who spent his time acting, singing, and dancing while neglecting his duties, as a leader. Those were his interests. So he really was not suited for the responsibility of political office. Galba, who was sponsored by the army, in other words, supported by the army. Otho murdered Galba and was Praetorian Guard supported. Vitellius, the frontier garrison supported. Vespasian, who was competent and hard-working. Oh, that's good. It was a tough job being emperor of the Roman Empire. A lot of work and responsibility. Apparently Vespasian was the guy who worked the hardest. Titus, I know there's this quote from Robin Williams in one of Robin Williams' movies where he imitates an actor from a movie and he says, "Oh, Titus, come hither." And there's actually I think there's the Arch of Titus in Rome. There's a famous painting of U.S. President Franklin Pierce passing under the Arch of Titus in I believe the Forum in Rome. So anyway, this is an interesting book about these fellows who were the emperor, the Caesars of the Roman Empire. Very good job by Michael Grant. The next book is The Joy of Hate by Greg Gutfeld, 2012. This is a fairly recent book. It's good. The author is a Fox News guy, one of those who was on The Five. The program's called The Five, which airs every day at 5 o'clock p.m. He's a conservative or libertarian. This book takes aim at liberals and leftists, those who attack conservatives. Gutfeld fights Islamic jihadists, feminists. He promotes Fox News. He debunks climate change in this book. He's a funny guy, gets carried away, makes complicated jokes. A very, very funny guy, smart guy, and of course he's not popular with liberals or leftists. Of course, he's a Fox News guy, which is basically a conservative forum. Greg Gutfeld. The next book is The Path Between the Seas, The Creation of the Panama Canal, 1870 to 1914, by David McCullough, 1977. Wow, this book has 617 pages. What an enormous effort David McCullough made in researching and writing this book. Yeah, he's one of my favorite historians, David McCullough. Good guy, really wonderful historian, and I believe he's still alive. What a book! What a big job! Now this is the canal which connected the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. And before it was built, ships had to go all the way around South America, or folks, if they could travel. They could get off a ship on one side of Panama. This small, you could say, an isthmus between North and South America, and then you'd have to travel overland to the other ocean, which would be time consuming. So anyway, this is what a book, what a big job. The French tried first to build this canal and failed, led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, who actually was the builder of the Suez Canal. Yeah, their big mistake is I think they wanted it to be the whole canal to be at sea level, which actually meant a lot more work, because there was a lot of digging. Actually, it's pretty mountainous there. And eventually, when it was finally built, it was built with locks. In other words, so it goes up and down, and meant less digging, much less digging. A lot of people died from malaria and yellow fever in this, actually, especially during the French efforts to build it. And investors lost their life savings in France, people who put up money to help build the canal and were hoping to, they were investing, hoping to make money, and they lost their savings. It was a very traumatic thing for France because ultimately it failed. They tried to do something very, very hard. It was actually a lot harder than the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea and means that European shipping did not have to go around Africa. And they accomplished that. But this was much tougher, and then they weren't able to do it. So this is pretty tough on them. Anyway, when it was finally built, most of the workers were from Jamaica and the Caribbean and Barbados. And one of the first things that had to happen, Panama had to become independent, or was encouraged to become independent from Colombia in South America. It was a part of Colombia. And the U.S., that built the canal, was struggling with the Colombian politicians. And so they decided to sort of support an independence movement. So this was a success for the United States. Theodore Roosevelt, who was the U.S. president, was the clock spring. He was really the guy behind this and helped make this happen. Although it wasn't completed until he was long out of the White House. And in 1870, the French started building, and they eventually gave up. And 1914, when it was finally finished. So this was really something. One of the big challenges was mosquitoes and disease. Tremendous engineering challenges, and the locks that had to be built in. In other words, the ships would come into an area that was enclosed. There were tremendous engineering challenges. These locks, which were enclosed areas in the canal between ships, would enter, and then they would the water level would be raised or lowered as they're going through. It would have to be raised because it was going upward. They had steam shovels from Bucyrus, Ohio. This was an unbelievable undertaking, a good job. One of the major challenges, the Chagres River, crisscrossed the canal route. So that river had to be dammed, and this was an ongoing problem because that was the natural flow of water. And you can't have that river crisscrossing the canal route, wreaking havoc. They had a lot of mud and landslides. They were basically cutting into mountains, and then the integrity of the mountain would be undermined, and then you'd have these tremendous landslides and a lot more work eventually that had to be done because when they would be doing some digging, and then they'd have a big landslide, and of course that earth would have to be removed. So after this was built, there was no more need for ships to go through Cape Horn around South America. It's the biggest job in world history. Talk about a job. Amazing. There were so many guys involved. working on this, and really incredible. A lot of guys died from sickness and accidents, and it was just an unbelievable feat that they accomplished, and an incredible undertaking. Connecting, making it so ships could pass between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Really, it's almost beyond belief that they were able to do it. But they did. They took on this challenge, and these fellows, and under the leadership of the United States. Really amazing. I just couldn't believe. You read this book and think, my gosh, how did they do this? But they just kept going. They had so many challenges, and really so. And McCullough does an incredible job. He really gives you the whole story. An amazing book. The next book is Liberty's Torch by Elizabeth Mitchell, 2014. This is a wonderful book. It's the story of the Statue of Liberty in New York City Harbor. French sculptor Auguste Bartholdi wanted to create the largest statue in the world. He initially wanted it to be by the Suez Canal in Egypt, but that didn't work out. Then he decided it would be a gift from the people of France to the people of the USA to celebrate their friendship between the two countries, France and the United States, going back to the American Revolution, when the French were a big help in the war militarily, and especially the French Navy. The French paid for the statue, and the Americans paid for the massive base. There were many obstacles, and the money was raised. October 28, 1886, it was unveiled in New York Harbor. Ulysses S. Grant, Joseph Pulitzer, Victor Hugo, Gustave Eiffel of the Eiffel Tower, Thomas Edison, and Emma Lazarus were all involved. America, land of the free. Yeah, of course, this is really a symbol of the United States, and for so many immigrants, European immigrants, this is the thing that they saw that inspired them, land of freedom. Lady Liberty, really big job. And it really is because of this one guy. He wanted to do it. He was a sculptor. This was his life's work, and so he was able to get support in France and the United States, and had to work. He was really a determined guy, and he got it done. And now it's a wonderful. It is a symbol of the friendship between the United States and France, and also a symbol of liberty in the United States, a land of freedom, and opportunity, where people have been able to come to the U.S. and live their lives in freedom and pursue their dreams, and have religious freedom and live their lives in the way they wanted to. And they came from countries where they were really limited by cultural issues and problems in their country. So this is a wonderful history book by Elizabeth Mitchell. The next book is The Dutch, a Milan Jakovic mystery by Les Roberts, 2001. This is number 12 in the series, these series of novels. The Sherlock Holmes of Cleveland, Ohio, Milan Jakovic, the private eye who in the course of his work checks out the scores of Cleveland Indians, Cleveland Cavaliers, or Cleveland Browns games. Lots of good Cleveland geography, streets, establishments, and places of interest. So these are wonderful novels set in Cleveland, Ohio by Les Roberts. The next book is Miracles and Massacres, True and Untold Stories of the Making of America by Glenn Beck, 2013. Glenn Beck is the political commentator I respect the most, and he's also a historian. This is a history book. It's really good. It's a series. Each chapter is a separate story from American history. Some of them include Jack Jouett's ride to save Thomas Jefferson from British capture. People are familiar with Paul Revere's ride in Massachusetts to warn the people that the British were coming. Well, this Jack Jouett, if he had not made this overnight horse ride, Thomas Jefferson could easily have been captured by the British, and that would have been a disaster for the American Revolution. Shays' Rebellion, which happened after the American Revolution was over, and really showed that we needed a stronger central government. The U.S. Constitution, and how that came to be, that meeting in Philadelphia in 1787. The Barbary War, the war the U.S. had with these countries of North Africa, which were attacking U.S. ships and imprisoning American sailors. Edison versus Westinghouse. Thomas Edison, the guy this was the issue of electricity in the early days of electricity. Wounded Knee, that very tragic thing that happened regarding American Indians in South Dakota. Part of the Indian Wars, and really, this thing that happened and the tragic fate of American Indians. Butch O'Hare, who actually O'Hare Airport is named after in Chicago. Iva Toguri, also known as Tokyo Rose, unjustly accused that she played this role in the Second World War in Japan as an announcer, luring Americans or trying to psychological warfare in the Second World War through the radio, targeting American servicemen. Apparently, this woman was not. They picked the wrong woman. Athens, Georgia, 1936, and the fight against corrupt rule there in this small town. My Lai, Vietnam, the massacre of Vietnamese civilians, very tragic thing, terrible thing that happened in the Vietnam War. The missing 9/11 terrorist. And Glenn Beck sets the record straight in this book. In the chapter on Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison doesn't come out very well, so history is full of distortions, and he's trying to tell the true story of these episodes from American history. Wonderful book. The next book is Come Back to Afghanistan, a California Teenager's Story by Syed Haider Akbar and Susan Burton, 2005. This is a wonderful book. The author wrote this book as an Afghan-American teenager. His father fought the Russians when they invaded Afghanistan and became an exile during the Taliban era, returned after the 2001 U.S. invasion. Now, this is the father of the author, was friends with Afghan President Karzai and became governor of Kunar province in Afghanistan. This book is about the author's several summers in Afghanistan, his determination to meet the challenge, wanting to experience his parents' and ancestors' country and contribute. He met President Karzai, traveled the country, interacted with American soldiers, and got sick a lot. So this it's very interesting because the author grew up in the United States, and he was growing up. He was a teenager in California, and then his family had left because of the Russian invasion and all the problems of the war, and then he went back with his father when his father decided to go back and work and serve as a governor of a province. So this author, he's a young guy and he's basically American, but he has a sense this is his heritage, these are his people, and he wants to be in touch with this, and because it's his father's country, his parents' country, and his grandparents and so forth. And he talks about his the challenges in Afghanistan, the security challenges, and just travel. The roads being real bad and bumpy, and then getting sick probably because of problems with drinking water. And he makes this. He really tried, and you got to give him a lot of credit. This is his heritage, and it was a challenge for him because he was culturally different, and he also was used to a much more comfortable life in the United States. But he decided he wanted to do it, so did a really good job. Really enjoyed this book. The next book is Lefty, an American Odyssey by Vernona Gomez and Lawrence Goldstone, 2012. This is a good book. It's the story of the life of Lefty Gomez, who was born in 1908. Died in 1989. He was a star pitcher for the New York Yankees in the 1930s. He had a childhood of rural poverty in California. He had a showgirl wife. He experienced fame and fortune. And he was a very humble, funny guy. He played with guys like Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Joe DiMaggio. Then he worked for the Wilson Sporting Goods Company and developed alcoholism and recovered. His father-in-law, Bill Schwartz, wrote this, quote, "Without a love of books, the richest man is poor, but endowed with this treasure, the poorest man is rich." My sentiments exactly. That was in this book. So he's a good guy, Lefty Gomez, star pitcher for the New York Yankees back in the 1930s. Wonderful book. The next book is American Sphinx, the Character of Thomas Jefferson by Joseph J. Ellis, 1996. This is a good book. The That's about the author of the Declaration of Independence, the promoter of religious freedom, father of the University of Virginia, his famous home of Monticello in Virginia, friend and rival of John Adams, father of the Democratic Party, slave owner, debtor, intellectual, Renaissance man, believer in the common man, tremendous hero in American history. Joseph J. Ellis is a fine historian for American history, and this is one of his books. And of course, Thomas Jefferson is one of the most important people in American history. Made such an incredible contribution to our country. The next book is Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, by Tim Blanning, 2016. This is a very interesting book. 501 pages. The hero of George Washington and John Adams, the man who transformed Prussia, which is now a part of Germany, into a powerful country. And then Prussia led German unification later. Basically, you had many small countries that were Germanic, that you didn't have a Germany in the old days. Of course, the Austrian Empire was Germanic, but what's now Germany was divided into many small countries, and so Prussia was the leader of this movement, this was after Frederick's life. He was the king of Prussia from 1740 to 1786. He was a warrior, patron of painters, architects, and musicians, the opera, plays, and intellectuals, a friend of Voltaire, a supporter of the Enlightenment. He called the Middle Ages, quote, 12 centuries of stupidity. He promoted the rule of law and religious freedom in Prussia, created a wise legal code, the equality of peasants and princes under the law, security, liberty, toleration. The arts and sciences flourished during Frederick the Great's rule. He abolished torture in the criminal justice system. Frederick cared. He cared about the common man, honor, duty, service. In the early 1800s, there were 16 wax figures of Frederick the Great on display in Berlin. He had 4 Italian greyhounds. Dogs were his constant companions. He was in the Hohenzollern royal family. And in German, his name was Friedrich der Grosse, or they called him Old Fritz. He would doff his hat to the crowd. He was a hero of Adolf Hitler and a Nazi icon. He conquered Silesia, which I believe is now in Poland. He endured some tough conditions as the common soldiers in war, risked his life in many battles. And he had a picture gallery in Sanssouci. He had his problems. Frederick the Great actually had a tough childhood. His father was very strict on him and really forced this a type of Protestant Christianity on him, and which he did. And then when he grew up, he really was fed up with. He did not practice Christianity himself, but he allowed religious freedom, partly because his father had denied that. His father was really promoting, I believe, one of the Protestant churches in Germany, Prussia. Anyway, see, he was an interesting guy, Frederick the Great, and if you're named Fred or Frederick, chances are this is how the name became popular. I know George Washington ordered a bust of Frederick the Great. He was a great military leader, and one of the keys, even though he was from a royal family, he would go to war and he would with the soldiers and endure what they were going through and risked his own life in battle. And so he was successful militarily in expanding the size of Prussia, and he did so many good things, in general, in terms of promoting learning and promoting a better legal system. More of a not a democracy. He was a king, but better treatment for everyone, and education. He promoted education and the arts. Did a lot of good for his country, and as I mentioned earlier, equality for the rich and poor under the law. So he did a lot of good for. He's a real hero today in German history. Frederick the Great. The next book is Dreamers and Deceivers: True Stories of the Heroes and Villains Who Made America by Glenn Beck, 2014. Now, this book is similar to the one I mentioned earlier. It's about these episodes from American history. It mentions people like Grover Cleveland, Edwin Armstrong, Woodrow Wilson, Charles Ponzi, of the famous Ponzi schemes. Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, Upton Sinclair, the author. Alan Turing, Alger Hiss, Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, and John Lasseter. All very interesting anecdotes and stories from American history. Yeah, the story of Walt Disney and what he achieved in his life. Very inspiring. Also, Steve Jobs. Wonderful book of American history by Glenn Beck. The next book is Tito and the Rise and Fall of Yugoslavia by Richard West, 1994. Well, I enjoyed this book. Actually, I read this book because I had a Serbian friend at this nursing home I was working at back in 2017, Dragana Lanum. And it's he's a hero of Serbs. So this is some good history from the Balkan Peninsula. And he gets into, a big part of this book is the conflict between Serbs and Croats, which was really, you could call it the curse of Yugoslavia. There's very bad feelings, and of course this is still ongoing today. Bad feelings between these two ethnic groups who were major, probably the top two in terms of population in the former Yugoslavia, Serbs and Croats. They are the same people, except Serbs are Orthodox Christians and Croats are Roman Catholic, and they hate each other. Well, it's really tragic. The Croats, according to this book, committed a genocide against the Serbs during World War II, murdering hundreds of thousands of Serbs. The Croats get support from the international Catholic community, and because they are Catholic, and the Catholic Church is really a huge organization worldwide. The Serbs are on their own because they're Orthodox Christians, and Russia was communist for a long time. Not many countries. There were very few. There aren't as many countries that were Orthodox Christians, and that's why you have an anti-Serb bias. I think 'cause Serbs tend to have a bad reputation, and I think it's because the Catholic Church supports Croats. Tito was a Croat, but more popular with the Serbs. He was actually a pretty good guy, but he couldn't stop the Serb-Croat hatred. Wonderful book. It appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find a good history book to read. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.